Hi, it's Jeff Alpin, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to Career Coach Office Hours. It's Friday, and as you know, I do a show live Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern, where I field questions from people about, here we go, job search, hiring more effectively, management, leadership, career transition, or if you want some advice about a particular workplace issue, I'm here to answer your questions. And all you have to do is to put it into chat. I'd be happy to cover it. Or you can message me through LinkedIn. My page there is linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. You have to send that to me in advance of the show because otherwise I'm not going to be switching over during a show to see if I've got a message from you. But I'm also going to remind you, my website, thebiggamehunter.us, is a place where you can schedule time for a free discovery call, a coaching session, find out about my courses, books, and guides. There's just a lot there to help you. And I'll also remind you that I host JobSearchTV.com on YouTube. It's also available on Amazon if you've got a Fire TV or a Fire Stick. It's a great show. And if you don't have a Fire TV or Fire Stick, it appears on bingenetworks.tv. And that goes to about 300 different streaming services. I also host the #1 podcast in Apple Podcasts for job search, No BS Job Search Advice Radio. We've been on air for more than 12 years, more than 2,450 episodes, and counting. So subscribe to the show. There's just a lot there that's going to help you as well. So again, that's No BS Job Search Advice Radio in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where it's a video podcast, Amazon Music, Google Play, anywhere you listen to podcasts, it's going to be available. And again, connect or follow me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Now, I've received a bunch of questions in advance, some related to job search, some related to leadership or management. And whatever it is, I'm happy to try and field your questions as well. So with that, the first question I have for today is, when asked what are your salary expectations in an interview, should you always go straight in with a high amount? No, that's what amateurs do. Amateurs think, oh, I'm looking for $1.5 million, and you're really a $65,000 a year person. They're not going to mentally dismiss you. Even if you say, I'm looking for 110, 120, and you're a $65,000 a year person, they're not going to really pay attention because they're going to know about what you're currently earning, because these aren't amateurs. They do this all the time. As a result, I believe there's a strategy called defer and deflect that will serve your interests far better, because you really don't know what their budget is. And thus, you're better off responding to them and saying, the fact of the matter is, I don't really know enough about this job to really give you a price. After all I've seen is a job description, or all I've done is speak with the third-party recruiter, and you mentioned them by their first name, and they told me about the job. But I haven't spoken with my future boss, met with the team, get a sense of what the real expectations are, what the role and responsibilities will be, other than what I've read. So can we circle back to that question later on? And then from there you go. And could you give me a sense of what the price point is for this job? At which point they go, but I asked you first. At which point you can respond with, and I asked you second. What's the difference? Give me a sense of what the budget is. And if they're not willing to tell you, that tells you something about that individual. So with a recruiter, they should be prepared to talk with you about it. If it's with the hiring manager, they know what their budget is. So they're normally more forthcoming with it if the third-party recruiter isn't. So Once you have an idea of what the budget is for the role, you can go in and talk with the hiring manager, get a sense of what their expectations are, and make a decision and circle back with HR later on. Circle back with the screener who really has no other than rejecting you because you acted like a jerk or you didn't know how to answer their simple questions well. They don't make the decision to hire. They influence how much you're paid, but they don't make the decision about salary. They're collecting data. So your job is to defer and deflect, to get off the money conversation so you can get to the actual decision maker, so you actually learn what the role and responsibilities are and get a sense of the environment instead of this is the first person you're talking with. You don't know anything other than what you read. And we all know that job descriptions aren't completely accurate, right? So don't play their game. Defer and deflect. It's really that simple. Next question. Is it appropriate for an employee to ask their manager why they're being so micro in their management style? Only if this is a changed behavior. And I say that because some people, this is how they are. And for some reason, you didn't pick up on that in the interviews. That's on you. That's not on them. So if this is a changed behavior, I would simply say to them, not in that tone, but I would say, is something wrong? Have I done something that gives you a reason to be concerned about me and what I'm doing? Because it seems like you're treating me differently. And you're micromanaging me, and that's not the way you normally are. What's going on? Now, normally you'll hear something about it's not you, it's me. I'm under a lot of pressure, and management is coming down on me, and they want me to deliver within this time framework. So excuse me for being this way, but it's important to me because they're up my rear, and thus I'm kicking the can down to you. They'll say something along those lines because no one likes to think of themselves as a micromanager. And if you say, why are you being so micro? Frankly, it's a little too aggressive. It's also obnoxious. Like, it is obnoxious, and you know that because you asked the question. So you know it's not the right way to do it. And thus, I'm giving you a better way to approach this instead of being a jerk and being critical of them by being, why are you being so micro? Obnoxious. Even though they're being obnoxious, there's something going on for them that's making them act this way. Might as well flush it out so you can actually have a good relationship with them because you're hearing the truth about what's going on for them. Is it a good sign that a recruiter will give me an update by next week during a phone screen? It doesn't mean anything. What it means is that they're going to figure out whether they can get you in to meet the hiring manager next week. That's all it means. After all, the recruiter, and I don't know if this is a corporate recruiter or a third-party recruiter. I'm going to assume that this is a corporate recruiter. They're going to try and get you onto someone's calendar, and they'll get back to you next week. That's about as much as it means. And if it's an agency recruiter, it means even less because they make no decisions except to reject people who they don't think they can get interviews for. And thus, if they're saying, we'll get back to you with an update next week, well, maybe I can get you in, maybe I can't. What's the big deal here? What gives you the idea that it's possible? It's possible that there is a good sign as that in that. It's really pretty value neutral. So don't overthink these things. Really, don't overthink these things and believe something more than what's really going on. Okay. I'm just going to remind you, if you've got a question for me about job search, hiring, management, leadership, career transition, or want advice about a particular workplace issue, put your question in the chat. I'd be very happy to answer it. Okay, we continue. How do you build morale as a leader? When I think of leadership, I think of a model that I heard from a man named Lance Secretan. And Lance refers to what he calls the CASTLE principles. CASTLE is an acronym for courage, authenticity, service, truthfulness, love, effectiveness. Again, CASTLE. So as a leader, you build morale by being courageous, by being authentic and in service to your people and in service to the people that you're ostensibly serving. You build morale by being truthful and demonstrating your love for your people. And thus, you always want to be effective too. But being effective without other attributes leaves people hungering for more. They feel like you don't really care when all you're doing is driving the bus hard. So, you have to be prepared to defend your people if they deserve defending. You have to be prepared to be courageous in defending them and in telling them the truth about how you're interpreting their behavior. Authenticity. No one wants to work for someone who's got an act. That you're honest with them, that they can feel your heart, that they matter to you. All these factors matter in how you build morale as a leader. Don't neglect any of them because there winds up being a hole in your armor that will eventually become bigger and bigger as you lose credibility with your staff. So, CASTLE: courage, authenticity, service, truthfulness, love, effectiveness. We go on. And let me just copy that in. Is it a good sign that I made the recruiter laugh during a phone screen? Jeez. We are looking for crumbs today. It can. It can also mean your answer was idiotic and they were laughing at you, not with you. They enjoyed your remark, but if you're not qualified, you're not getting any further interviews. That's the fact of it. So don't overthink these things. Just go through the process, continue on, see if they want to ask you out on another date, because I kind of look at interviewing as like a dating process. And thus, what you want to be doing is making them fall in love with you. No love, no interviews, no offers. It's that simple. Make sure that you can answer your questions in a world-class way. And one of the things, I developed a course that you can order on my website. It's called the Ultimate Job Interview Framework. It's also available as a book on Amazon, paperback or a Kindle book. And the course is particularly good. The book is also good, but the course, again, I really like the course. So you can rent or buy it through my website, thebiggamehunter.us/courses. And it will teach you an interview framework that's very effective, that will make you stand out in a good way from your competition. Okay, let's continue on. Should a leader be a risk taker? I'm sorry, I missed a question from someone. Let me come back to, actually, let me answer this question, and then Samit, I'm going to come back to you, okay? Should a leader be a risk taker? Yes and no. It depends on what you mean by risk taker. Leaders don't want, you can't risk the farm. You can't risk everything. Because you can lose everything. You want to take measured risk. I'm not talking about being risk averse. You need to take risks because doing the same thing repeatedly in the same way it's always been done can leave you failing, is the truth of it. Because the fact is, people want to hire. Well, if you just do the same things as they've always been done, you'll get the same results as always have been gotten. What do they need you for? Thus, the question is, what is a risk for you? I don't know that answer. I believe risk shows up as change many times. And thus, you're trying to make changes to the way things have always been done, but measured risk, so that it's kind of like in the stock market. Do you push all your chips into the middle of the table like at Las Vegas the crazy people do? And yes, they're heroes when they win the big bets, but they also wash out a lot. So don't be such a risk taker that you risk everything. Risk the business, risk the project, risk your job. Risk your job, risk the business if you fail. So not that big a risk, but incremental improvements can be risky too. Samit, let me come to your question now. I want to join a big multinational corporation as a software developer, but I have experience only in small companies. I am an experienced professional with career gaps of a year and a half in 5 years. Will they consider me? Now, depending upon where in the world you are, the answer is yes or no. It depends on relative degree of desperation. It also depends upon what software you have experience developing and whether the gap is current. So if you've been out of work for the last year and a half, you better have done a lot to keep yourself up to speed. And you're better off, rather than applying, to be referred by people. Now, the truth is, you're always better off being referred by people to get your interviews and get in the door. But minimally, if you're not current, if you're feeling rusty in your skills, you've got to improve them so that when you interview, the rustiness doesn't show. After all, you're a risk for them. The risk is you're rusty. They want someone who can hit the ground running and is able to deliver quickly without a big learning curve. So if you are someone who requires a big learning curve, you are at a competitive disadvantage with those people who don't need that sort of support, especially at a large multinational corporation. So try to get referred, but first make sure that your skills are up to speed so that this way you can pass interviews and not wash out. I hope that was helpful to you, Samit. Let me continue on, unless you have another question, or if someone else has a question, put it into chat. I'd be very happy to answer it, okay? Now, let me just get back here. What is the difference between sending your resume directly to a company's HR department or going through recruiters? So, I used to be a recruiter. I did it for a long time. One of the advantages of going through an agency recruiter, a third-party recruiter, is that this one company is not the only one that they represent. They may have other opportunities that fit you too. And thus, if you send it directly to the company's HR department, well, you're going through the filter called the applicant tracking system that may not pass you through. And then if you ask the agency recruiter to submit you, usually what happens is the company says, sorry, we already know that person because they applied to us directly and we rejected them. And thus, you don't have an advocate to push for you. There's no one there singing your praises in the course of the conversations. So the reality is, I believe you're better off going through a third-party recruiter rather than the HR department. And if you are going to go to the HR department, be referred by someone who works for that firm so that in this way, number one, they're always pushing for you. They can speak firsthand about your capabilities, and they do earn an employee referral bonus usually for recommending you. and thus they have a reason to advocate for you. So, you know, the advantage of being referred really does serve you. And contacting the HR department, here's one of the other problems that happens. You were referred and they claim ownership over your resume forever. Let me explain that to you. Companies don't like paying recruiters fees. And thus, if you apply directly, they may claim that they know you, even though they never spoke to you before, years from now, rather than pay a fee to an agent. Do you really want to get blocked out because you were referred because you went directly at this time, and later on a recruiter told you about a job and they can't get you in because you applied years before? I know that seems unfair and crazy, but that is the way companies conduct themselves because they're really fee adverse. They're trying to avoid paying money to other people if they can avoid it. So the long and short of it is, I tend to prefer recruiters. If not recruiters, my second choice, actually the first choice these days, is being referred by an internal person who really knows you and can advocate for you, specifically with the hiring manager involved. Second choice is recruiters. Third choice, a distant third choice, is applying through HR. What is an exceptional trait for someone who leads the way? I want to think about that one for a second. Excuse me while I take a sip here. I think an exceptional trait for someone who's a leader is their ability to inspire people to do great work. Now, I want to be clear. Inspiration, inspiring people, because they can see and express the vision, is important. Because if it's just a humdrum, we need to do this because it's important to the company, no one gets really excited about that. But if this leader can inspire people to their best, that is a home run to me. That's a great quality for someone to have. And thus, that to me is a trait worth following. Because remember, one of the attributes of leaders is that they have followers. Okay. I'm going to remind you again, put your questions about job search, hiring, management, leadership, career transition, or a question about a particular workplace issue into chat. I'd be very happy to answer your questions. I'm going to do a few more and then I'm going to sign out today. If you are not selected for an interview, what can you say? Well, do you think you can hypnotize people to talk to you just because you want to be spoken with? I don't think so. I think what you can do is ask courteously, what didn't you see in my resume that caused you to reject me? At which point, some people will ignore the question, in which case I would take one more cut at it a few days later and say, perhaps you missed my message, where I asked what you didn't see in my resume that caused me to be rejected for interviews. It's like you said that when you have heard you're rejected, and if you don't get a response 2 days later, if you still don't get a response, let it go. See, if you understand the reasons why you were rejected, it gives you an opportunity to respond by saying, that's interesting, because the fact of the matter is, I do have that experience. So you always want to be in a situation where you're not swimming upstream. You're able to defend your capabilities and your ability to solve what it is they're looking for. So Always put yourself in the position where you're being courteous, respectful, can advocate for yourself, and politely understand what it is that prompted them to say no to you. And then, if necessary, be able to say, that's interesting because that is my experience. Or you can just say, thank you. That's true. Because you don't want to just sell yourself because you want to sell yourself and you want that interview. They've got a problem that needs to be solved. And you insisting that you can do this job when there's nothing in your background that suggests you really can, it's goofy on your part. Don't do it. So what can you say? Would you be kind enough to tell me what you didn't see in my resume that prompted it to be rejected? That's as much as you can say, because then you can counterpunch. Should employers include personality interview questions when assessing a job candidate? No. The first thing you want to do is have people demonstrate that they have the required skills in their resume. You then want to have a conversation with them. Have the screener do that. That confirms the basics of what they claim their experience is. Then from there, I'd have one more person talk with them representing the organization, the department, and such, and thus advocate for their candidacy with you. And once that's occurred, I'd continue the process and say, one of the things we like to do is a personality assessment to see about fit. There are not many good ones, but there is one I like. I'm not going to mention the name right now. That will get a real sense of person and fit. To suggest that asking a few simple questions is going to allow you to determine whether someone will fit your group. It won't. 5 questions on personality? Give me a break. That does nothing. So, no, I wouldn't do it until further on in the process, so that in this way you have an opportunity to really assess their knowledge, not their fit. Focus on the knowledge initially rather than quote unquote alleged fit. And I say it that way because when people are on interviews, they're on good behavior, as are you. Neither of you is being completely open and honest with one another. So, giving someone a personality test, no, don't do it. Seriously, don't do it. So I'm going to bring the show today to a close. I'm Jeff Altman. Hope you found today's show helpful. If you did and you're watching on YouTube or on LinkedIn, share it, leave a comment, do something that indicates you found it was worthwhile. Also, I'm going to mention that I'll be back on Tuesday with more, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. And you can watch it on LinkedIn. You can watch it on YouTube on the JobSearchTV channel. Also, message me before the show with questions, because I don't presume you're sitting around most of the time, able to ask questions while you're at work, right? So you can message me before the show, and I'll make the point of answering your questions during it. Also, visit my website, thebiggamehunter.us, to schedule time for a free discovery call, a coaching session, to visit my blog, which has more than 1,200 searchable posts that you can watch, listen to, or read that will help you in these areas. You can also find out about my courses, books, and guides. There's a lot there to help you. Also, subscribe to JobSearchTV.com on YouTube. Download the app of the same name on Amazon. You can watch me also on BingeNetworks.tv, which appears on more than 300 streaming services. So when you go into BingeNetworks.tv, search for JobSearchTV there. I'm sure you'll find me, and you'll be able to find out more of my ideas. Subscribe to No BS Job Search Advice Radio and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch me, listen to me. There's just a lot there that will help you. Also, follow me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the big game hunter. Have a terrific day. And most importantly, be great. Take care.